Hello students, in this video we'll discuss about fundamental rights. That is the part 3 of the constitution. Part 3 of the constitution dealing with the fundamental rights. So fundamental rights are constituted under articles 12 to 35. These are the major articles which deal with the fundamental rights under part 3 of the constitution. To begin with, let us try to understand what is the nature of fundamental rights. Nature of fundamental rights. Okay, by stating nature, we will try to know what is the content and what they represent. What is the content of fundamental rights and what do the fundamental rights represent in totality? Number one, fundamental rights represent the natural rights of man. Fundamental rights represent the natural rights of man. Natural rights of man are the rights that belong to a human being naturally. That is, they are not given externally. They are inseparable from a man. They belong to the man by nature as a human species. Okay. Example, the right to conscience is a natural right, but it could not possibly be a human right. Conscience, that is emotion to decide and distinguish between good and bad. This is something instinctive to human nature. That is why it is a natural right. Though you give it or though the state gives it to a person or not, it is inherently existent by human. So natural rights are nothing but inalienable rights that are natural to the personality of a man, and thus they are inseparable. Thus, fundamental rights represent natural rights of a man. Okay. Also note that, see, some of you have this doubts. Why are fundamental rights named as so? What is fundamental about fundamental rights? Fundamental rights are named so because they are guaranteed and protected by the Constitution. That is, what is the Constitution? Constitution is a fundamental law of the land, and also they are fundamental. Fundamental rights are fundamental in the sense that they are most essential for all-round development of individuals. Okay, they are the most essential ingredients for all-round development of individuals' personality. Okay. Also, fundamental rights protect the ideal of political democracy. They operate as limitations on the tyranny of the executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. Fundamental rights are positive in the way that they give rights to the citizens. However, they also impose some limitations on the tyranny or the excesses of the executive and the arbitrary laws passed by the legislatures like the state assemblies or the parliament. Okay. Number two, fundamental rights also include human rights. What do you mean by this? Human rights are rights that develop from the development of civilizational values. Example, through cultural development, we have over a period of time developed some human rights. Example, the right to form unions and associations is a human right, but it is not necessarily a natural right. This has been claimed by man later on after the advancement of culture and civilization. The right to free and compulsory education, the right against bonded labor, these are some examples of human rights. Okay, the right to life, though is a natural right, and right to personal liberty is also a natural right. So that is a distinction that you can draw between natural rights and human rights. Also, please note that all natural rights have been put in fundamental rights. Okay, but only few or some human rights have been incorporated in fundamental rights. So look at the sanctity of fundamental rights. Every right which is inherently inalienable, inseparable, or which is inherent to human instinct, that has been definitely included in the fundamental rights. Okay. Next, Human rights evolve as civilization evolves. So state may or may not recognize them. The state should definitely recognize natural rights as they are inseparable from man. Also, a lot of you have a question: are fundamental rights superior to state? Are fundamental rights superior to the state or the government? Those fundamental rights which represent the natural rights of man or human being are made superior to the state system itself, because state itself is a creation of man, and these rights are earlier or existent or inseparable by the human nature. Fundamental rights are made superior to the states as they contain the natural rights of man and some basic human rights which precede the state itself. That is why these rights are made inviolable by the state. Okay, what do you mean by inviolable? If at all the state is encroaching your fundamental rights, you can approach the judiciary. Next, okay, we have discussed that fundamental rights are represent natural rights, they represent human rights. Okay, and now the third point is some fundamental rights represent or include the principles of natural justice. We are discussing the nature of fundamental rights, and some fundamental rights include or represent the principles of natural justice. The principles of natural justice have been deliberately included in fundamental rights as India is a democracy. For rule of law, that is, rule of law basically states that it is the law which is supreme, not the individual, the monarch, or somebody else. It is the law which is supreme. Thus, for the rule of law to operate, and thus, as democracy rests on rule of law, the principles of natural justice can uphold the rule of law. Okay. Okay, the principles of natural justice can uphold the rule of law. What are the principles of natural justice? Number one, the right to be heard in an open court or required authority before being punished. See, anybody who has committed a mistake, he has to be given the right to express his point of view before a judicial court or any required authority. For example, Article 22 of the Constitution, which is the fundamental right to be protected from arbitrary arrest and detention. And also Article 20 of the Constitution, which states that a person cannot be punished for the same offense more than once. Okay. Another principle of natural justice is no man should be a judge in his own case. Number three, no party should be condemned unheard, and reasons for the decisions must be disclosed to the party involved. So these are some of the fundamental pretexts of natural justice, so that there's impartial justice and there is, enriched judicial system. Okay. Thus, fundamental rights are a set of basic human rights which represent the values of the country or the people. So having looked at what is the nature of fundamental rights by stating that they are natural rights, they represent human rights, and also they represent some principles of natural justice. Now let us try to understand the characteristics or the features of fundamental rights. Okay. Number one, fundamental rights in India's constitution are enumerated. That is, they are listed or mentioned in the constitution itself, right? Under Article 12 to 35, you have various fundamental rights which are listed in the constitution itself. Number two, fundamental rights under Part 3 of India's constitution are not absolute. Just now we have discussed, they sometimes have some limitations. They are not absolute. Okay, because they are subject to the limitation called reasonable restrictions. Okay, reasonable restrictions. Okay, so these reasonable restrictions on the fundamental rights are mentioned in the constitution itself. Okay, so regarding the details of this, how fundamental rights are not absolute in nature, we will be discussing in our further lectures. Number 3, fundamental rights are legally enforceable with the help of the judiciary by the plea for writs, WRIT, the writ jurisdiction. Okay, they are legally enforceable by the courts. Number 4, under Part 3 of India's Constitution, some fundamental rights are available only to citizens of India. Some fundamental rights like Article 19, 29, 15, 16, 30. Some of these articles like Article 16, 15, 19, 29, and 30 are available only to citizens of India. They are not available to aliens, or they are not available to foreigners, simply said. So fundamental rights which are guaranteed to the citizens as well as non-citizens. Some of the fundamental rights are guaranteed to citizens as well as non-citizens. Like, for example, equality before law under Article 14, right to life under Article 21. These fundamental rights are available both to citizens as well as non-citizens. For example, a foreigner visiting India, if he is denied to his right to life, everybody will start killing the foreigners. So that's why some fundamental rights are available to citizens as well as foreigners. Okay. Next, some fundamental rights enlarge the state action. Okay, that is, they provide an opportunity on the state to act. So we are discussing about the characteristics or the features of the fundamental rights. Some fundamental rights, make the state, they ask the state to do some activity. For example, the state to abolish the practice of untouchability and make it a punishable criminal offense. This has been mentioned under Article 17 of the Constitution. So based on this Article 17, the Parliament or the state will pass a law which makes untouchability a criminal offense. Also, for example, Article 15, which states that the state to provide concessions to the weaker sections, such as women, children, the scheduled caste, and scheduled tribes. So it is, giving a directive. It is impelling the state to perform, so as to, achieve the novel objectives of the Constitution. Number 5, some fundamental rights restrict the state action. Some fundamental rights restrict the state action. What could this be? That is, it imposes some limitations on the state. For example, Article 20. You see, Article 20 of the Constitution, it prohibits the state from passing a criminal law on a backward date. That is, there shall be no retrospective criminal legislation. Whatever crime that you have committed today, you have to be punished for the crime which has been committed, because this crime has been committed and it is against the law which is existent on that date. You cannot say that today you pass a law and say that whatever crime that you have committed 10 years back or 15 years back, which was not an offense then, you are punishable by law. You cannot say that. So that is why Article 20 prohibits retrospective state legislature, retrospective criminal legislation. So this is acting as a restriction on the excesses of the state. Okay. Also, for example, Article 15 state, what does Article 15 of the Constitution state? It states that state will not discriminate citizens on the basis of religion, race, caste, gender, or place of birth. Okay. One point that you can remember over here, though this is out of context, I would just like to point out that fundamental rights can be suspended during a national emergency under Article 352 of the Constitution, except some fundamental rights like Article 20 and 21. This Article 20 and 21 cannot be suspended even when there is a national emergency in the country under Article 352. The six freedoms under Article 19, we will try to discuss what are the six freedoms under Article 19. They also can be suspended during national emergency only when emergency is declared on the grounds of war or external aggression, but not on the ground of internal rebellion. Okay, just please note this. Okay, what is that is the importance that the fundamental rights have. Okay, then the sixth important characteristic of fundamental rights are some fundamental rights are available against private citizens. Some fundamental rights are available against private citizens. For example, Article 23 and 24, if you see, they are right against exploitation, right against human trafficking and child labor. Sorry, Article 17, for that matter, it seeks for abolition of untouchability. So whoever individual practices this evil practices like untouchability, human trafficking, exploiting the fellow human beings, they will be punished. Okay, they are liable to prosecution. Okay. Thus, Constitution of India itself categorizes fundamental rights into a series of rights, which we will be discussing in due course of this lecture. Next, now having understood the nature and the characteristics of the fundamental rights, in our next video, we will get into the details of each of the fundamental rights. Thank you.